As the first light of dawn crept into the chaotic labyrinth of the bustling metropolis, its faint glow barely penetrated the shadows under the bridge where Mary lay shivering, wrapped in a torn and ragged blanket. The distant rumble of early morning traffic was her unwelcome alarm clock, stirring her from a restless sleep. Slowly, she pushed herself up, her body protesting with each movement, muscles stiff and aching from yet another night on the unforgiving concrete. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Mary, now in her mid-50s, had a spirit molded by the relentless trials of life. There was a time when she had a home, a family, a life overflowing with joy and love. But those precious days had been mercilessly ripped away by the cruel hands of fate when her husband abandoned her, casting her into the harsh reality of the streets. She gathered her meager possessions, a frayed backpack and a threadbare coat, and rose, stretching her sore limbs. Her stomach growled, a stark reminder of her unending battle against hunger. With a sigh that carried the weight of countless sorrows, Mary trudged towards the affluent district, hoping to find discarded scraps in the trash bins. As she navigated through the city's crowded streets, the glaring disparity between her life and that of the wealthy residents was impossible to ignore. She walked past grand buildings, their gleaming facades reflecting the morning sunlight, and perfectly manicured lawns that seemed to mock her bedraggled appearance. The air was thick with the tantalizing aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods, a cruel reminder of the luxuries forever out of her reach. Her journey led her to an opulent neighborhood, where the houses resembled palaces more than homes. She approached a large trash bin outside one such mansion, her heart pounding with a cocktail of desperation and hope. Glancing around to ensure she was unobserved, she began to sift through the garbage. "Please, let there be something," she murmured to herself, her hands trembling with both cold and fear as she rummaged through the waste. Her thoughts often wandered back to her past life, where family dinners and laughter were the norm. She recalled the warmth of a home, the sense of belonging, and the love that had once surrounded her. These bittersweet memories fueled her determination to persevere, to find some semblance of comfort in a world that had seemingly forgotten her existence. As she continued her search, the sun climbed higher, casting a golden hue over the city. She found a half-eaten sandwich and a bruised apple, which she quickly stashed in her bag. It wasn't much, but it would sustain her for another day. Her eyes then caught sight of a man emerging from a nearby mansion. He was impeccably dressed, carrying a large, black trash bag. Instinctively, Mary ducked behind the bin, watching him intently. He walked to the curb and nonchalantly tossed the bag into the trash bin, his face a mask of indifference. Curiosity gnawed at Mary. She waited until the man disappeared back inside before cautiously approaching the bag. Something about it seemed unusual. It was much heavier than typical household waste. Her heart pounded as she pulled the bag out and opened it. Inside, she found children's clothes stained with blood and broken toys. A chill surged through her, and she was overwhelmed by a wave of nausea. What had she stumbled upon? Her mind raced with dark possibilities, each more horrifying than the last. Mary's breath quickened as she darted glances around, ensuring no one had witnessed her discovery. The sight of the blood-stained clothes was seared into her mind, a chilling indicator that something was dreadfully amiss. Hastily, she closed the bag and shoved it back into the bin, her mind swirling with fear and questions. Mary's heart pounded as she swiftly looked around, ensuring no one had seen her. The blood-stained clothes were burned into her memory, a haunting reminder that something was terribly wrong. She quickly closed the bag and shoved it back into the bin, her mind swirling with questions and fears. What should she do? Could she go to the police? Would they even believe her a homeless woman with nothing to her name? Mary took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She couldn't let this go. She had to find out what was happening, even if it meant putting herself in danger. The thought of a child in peril was too much to bear. Determined, she turned away from the bin and started to walk back towards the bridge, her mind already forming a plan. She would need help, clothes that made her look presentable, and a way to get inside that mansion. It was a daunting task, but Mary knew she had to try. Mary's mind raced as she walked through the bustling streets, her thoughts a whirlwind of fear and determination. The image of the blood-stained children's clothes haunted her, but she knew her credibility as a homeless woman was fragile. She needed a plan. She approached an old second-hand clothing store she had visited before. Inside, the musty smell of old garments greeted her, along with racks of clothes from different eras. Behind the counter stood Linda, the store's owner, a skeptical yet kind woman in her late 40s. "Mary, what brings you here so early?" Linda asked, her eyebrows raised in surprise. "I need some decent clothes, Linda." "Something presentable," Mary replied, her voice steady but urgent. Linda eyed her suspiciously. "What's going on?" "You never cared much about appearances before." Mary hesitated, knowing she couldn't reveal too much. "I've got a job interview. I need to look the part," she lied, hoping to sound convincing. Linda sighed and gestured towards a rack of clothes. "Go ahead, take what you need." As Mary rummaged through the clothes, she felt a rush of gratitude. She found a simple but clean dress and a pair of shoes that fit her well enough. She turned to Linda, holding the items. "Thank you, Linda. I'll pay you back. I promise, just take care of yourself," Linda replied, her tone softening. Mary left the store with her new clothes and found a public restroom where she could change. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she hardly recognized the woman staring back. The clean dress and neat hair gave her a semblance of her former self, a reminder of the life she once had. Her next stop was a small hardware store. She needed a few basic supplies: a flashlight, a small screwdriver, and some rope. She gathered these items, spending the last of her saved money. With her preparations complete, Mary sat on a bench, collecting her thoughts. The fear of what she was about to do gnawed at her, but the determination to uncover the truth was stronger. She thought about her past, the injustices she had faced, and the resilience that had kept her going all these years. "This is for the children," she whispered to herself, steeling her resolve. As the sun began to set, Mary made her way back to the wealthy neighborhood. The opulent mansions loomed ahead, their grandeur a stark contrast to her modest appearance. She walked with purpose, each step bringing her closer to the mansion she had infiltrated earlier. Under the cover of dusk, Mary approached the side entrance she had used before. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding. The stakes were high, but she couldn't turn back now. "I'm coming for you," she murmured, thinking of the children she needed to save. As she neared the side entrance, she saw Alice, a young woman in her 20s, stepping out with a trash bag. Alice wore a uniform that marked her as part of the cleaning staff. Mary took a deep breath and approached her. "Hi there," Mary called softly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Alice turned, surprised. "Oh, hello. Can I help you? I'm new here." "They told me to report for the night shift," Mary lied, hoping her story would hold. Alice frowned slightly, but then shrugged. "All right, come on in. I can show you where to get started." Mary followed Alice through the service door, trying to memorize the layout as they walked. The mansion's interior was even more opulent than she had imagined, with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and ornate furnishings. It felt like another world, far removed from her reality. "Here's the supply closet," Alice said, opening a door to reveal cleaning supplies. "Grab what you need and start with the east wing. It's usually quiet over there." "Thank you," Mary replied, grabbing a mop and bucket. "I appreciate it." Alice gave her a brief nod before heading back to her duties. Mary exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. She was in. Now she just had to find the evidence she needed. As Mary moved cautiously through the mansion, her heart hammered in her chest. She entered the East Wing, her senses on high alert. The grandeur of the place was overwhelming, but she couldn't afford to be distracted. She needed to find any clues that could explain the blood-stained clothes. As she meticulously cleaned, she kept her eyes peeled for anything out of the ordinary. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching. Quickly, Mary ducked into a nearby closet, peeking through the slats of the door. She saw a man in his 40s, dressed in a suit, talking on his phone. "Yes, everything is taken care of," he said, his tone cold and businesslike. "No, there's no need to worry. It'll be handled." Mary's heart raced. Who was he talking to? And what was he handling? She waited until the man left before slipping out of the closet. She needed to be even more careful now. The stakes were higher than she had imagined. Determined, Mary continued her search, moving through the mansion with quiet efficiency. She peeked into rooms, looked through papers, and kept an eye out for anything that seemed out of place. Hours passed and her nerves were frayed, but she finally found something. In a small office, she discovered a hidden compartment in the desk. Inside was a file labeled Project Harmony. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The file contained disturbing details about illegal activities involving children and trafficking. Mary's blood ran cold. This was the evidence she needed. She carefully copied the most incriminating documents and tucked them into her bag. Her mind raced with the implications. She had to get this information to the authorities, but she had to be smart about it. As she made her way back towards the service entrance, Mary felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had uncovered something terrible, but she had the power to stop it. With each step, her resolve hardened. This was for the children, for justice, and for all the time she had been overlooked and underestimated. She would make sure the truth came to light, no matter the cost. What should she do? Could she risk going to the police? Would they even take her seriously, a homeless woman with nothing to her name? Taking a deep breath, Mary steeled herself. She couldn't let this go. A child could be in grave danger, and the thought was unbearable. Resolute, she turned away from the bin and began the walk back to the bridge, her mind already forming a plan. She needed help, proper clothes, and a way to infiltrate the mansion. It was a daunting task, but Mary knew she had to try. As she navigated through the bustling streets, her thoughts were a maelstrom of fear and determination. The image of the blood-stained children's clothes haunted her, but she understood her credibility as a homeless woman was fragile. She needed a plan. Approaching an old second-hand clothing store she had visited before, she braced herself. Inside, the familiar musty scent of old garments greeted her, and racks of clothes from various eras lined the walls. Behind the counter stood Linda, the store's owner, a skeptical yet kind woman in her late 40s. "Mary, what brings you here so early?" Linda asked, raising an eyebrow in surprise. "I need some decent clothes, Linda." "Something presentable," Mary replied, her voice steady but urgent. Linda eyed her suspiciously. "What's going on? You never cared much about appearances before." Mary hesitated, knowing she couldn't reveal too much. "I've got a job interview. I need to look the part," she lied, hoping to sound convincing. Linda sighed and gestured towards a rack of clothes. "Go ahead, take what you need." As Mary sifted through the clothes, she felt a surge of gratitude. She found a simple but clean dress and a pair of shoes that fit well enough. Turning to Linda, she held up the items. "Thank you, Linda. I'll pay you back. I promise, just take care of yourself," Linda replied, her tone softening. Mary left the store with her new clothes and found a public restroom where she could change. Looking at herself in the mirror, she hardly recognized the woman staring back. The clean dress and neat hair gave her a semblance of her former self, a bittersweet reminder of the life she once had. Her next stop was a small hardware store. She needed a few basic supplies: a flashlight, a small screwdriver, and some rope. She gathered these items, spending the last of her saved money. With her preparations complete, Mary sat on a bench, gathering her thoughts. The fear of what she was about to do gnawed at her, but her determination to uncover the truth was stronger. She thought about her past, the injustices she had faced, and the resilience that had kept her going all these years. "This is for the children," she whispered to herself, steeling her resolve. As the sun began to set, Mary made her way back to the wealthy neighborhood. The opulent mansions loomed ahead, their grandeur a stark contrast to her modest appearance. She walked with purpose, each step bringing her closer to the mansion she had infiltrated earlier. Under the cover of dusk, Mary approached the side entrance she had used before. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding. The stakes were high, but she couldn't turn back now. "I'm coming for you," she murmured, thinking of the children she needed to save. As she neared the side entrance, she saw Alice, a young woman in her 20s, stepping out with a trash bag. Alice wore a uniform that marked her as part of the cleaning staff. Mary took a deep breath and approached her. "Hi there," Mary called softly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Alice turned, surprised. "Oh, hello. Can I help you? I'm new here." "They told me to report for the night shift," Mary lied, hoping her story would hold. Alice frowned slightly, but then shrugged. "All right, come on in. I can show you where to get started." Mary followed Alice through the service door, trying to memorize the layout as they walked. The mansion's interior was even more opulent than she had imagined, with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and ornate furnishings. It felt like another world, far removed from her reality. "Here's the supply closet," Alice said, opening a door to reveal cleaning supplies. "Grab what you need and start with the east wing. It's usually quiet over there." "Thank you," Mary replied, grabbing a mop and bucket. "I appreciated." Alice gave her a brief nod before heading back to her duties. Mary exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. She was in. Now she just had to find the evidence she needed. As Mary moved cautiously through the mansion, her heart hammered in her chest. She entered the east wing, her senses on high alert. The grandeur of the place was overwhelming, but she couldn't afford to be distracted. She needed to find any clues that could explain the blood-stained clothes. As she meticulously cleaned, she kept her eyes peeled for anything out of the ordinary. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching. Quickly, Mary ducked into a nearby closet, peeking through the slats of the door. She saw a man in his 40s, dressed in a suit, talking on his phone. "Yes, everything is taken care of," he said, his tone cold and businesslike. "No, there's no need to worry. It'll be handled." Mary's heart raced. Who was he talking to? And what was he handling? She waited until the man left before slipping out of the closet. She needed to be even more careful now. The stakes were higher than she had imagined. Determined, Mary continued her search, moving through the mansion with quiet efficiency. She peeked into rooms, looked through papers, and kept an eye out for anything that seemed out of place. Hours passed, and her nerves were frayed, but she finally found something. In a small office, she discovered a hidden compartment in the desk. Inside was a file labeled Project Harmony. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The file contained disturbing details about illegal activities involving children and trafficking. Mary's blood ran cold. This was the evidence she needed. She carefully copied the most incriminating documents and tucked them into her bag. Her mind raced with the implications. She had to get this information to the authorities, but she had to be smart about it. As she made her way back towards the service entrance, Mary felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had uncovered something terrible, but she had the power to stop it. With each step, her resolve hardened. This was for the children, for justice, and for all the time she had been overlooked and underestimated. She would make sure the truth came to light, no matter the cost. Mary made her way to the East Wing, her eyes meticulously scanning every detail. The mansion was enormous, with countless rooms and winding hallways. As she cleaned, she remained vigilant, listening for any unusual sounds while trying to appear inconspicuous. Turning a corner, she found herself in a dimly lit corridor. A sense of unease crept over her as she noticed a door at the far end that stood out. It was heavier and more secure than the others. Her curiosity piqued. Mary approached cautiously. The door was slightly ajar. With a deep breath, she pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was small and sparsely furnished, but what caught her attention was the young girl huddled in the corner, her eyes wide with fear. "Oh my God," Mary whispered, her heart breaking at the sight. "Are you all right?" The girl didn't respond, her gaze fixed on Mary with a mix of hope and terror. Mary knelt beside her, trying to offer comfort. "It's okay. I'm here to help you," she said gently. "What's your name?" "Emily," the girl whispered, her voice trembling. "Emily, we need to get you out of here," Mary said, determination hardening her resolve. "But first, I need to know if there are others." "Are there more children here?" Emily nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, in the basement." Mary's heart sank. She knew she had to act quickly. "Okay, I'm going to get help. I promise I'll come back for you." She stood up, taking note of the room's location and the security measures around it. There were cameras and a keypad lock on the door, details she would need to remember. As she made her way back through the mansion, her mind raced with plans. She needed to gather more evidence and come up with a solid strategy to rescue the children. But for now, she had to get out and regroup. Slipping out the same way she came in, Mary breathed a sigh of relief as she stepped into the cool night air. The mansion loomed behind her, a place of opulence hiding dark secrets. She had confirmed her worst fears, but she was more determined than ever. She would return, and she would bring justice with her. Mary returned to the mansion the next night, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She slipped through the service door, blending into the shadows as she made her way to the hidden room where she had found Emily. As she approached, she heard voices. She pressed herself against the wall, straining to listen. "You need to keep quiet and do as you're told," a man's voice said sternly. It was John. "I don't want any trouble. Just let me go." Emily's small, terrified voice pleaded. "We can't have you causing problems," a woman's voice added coldly. This must be Sarah, John's wife. Mary peeked through the slightly ajar door and saw Emily cowering in the corner, her eyes wide with fear. John stood over her, his expression harsh, while Sarah watched with a detached calmness. "This girl is valuable," Sarah said. "We can't afford to let her go. Make sure she understands the consequences." Mary's blood ran cold. She had to do something, but she needed a plan. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She couldn't rush in blindly. With quiet steps, Mary retreated down the hall, formulating a strategy. She needed to find a way to get Emily and any other children out safely. She would need to disable the security cameras and unlock the keypad lock. Her mind raced with possibilities. She returned to the hidden room, her resolve solidified. She had to act now. Mary pushed the door open gently, stepping into the room with a calm she didn't quite feel. "Emily, it's me," she whispered. "I'm here to get you out." Emily looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "Mary, please hurry." "Stay quiet and follow me," Mary instructed, turning to the door. She knew they needed to move quickly and silently to avoid detection. As they slipped into the hallway, Mary spotted a security camera. She reached into her bag, pulling out a small mirror she had taken from the second-hand store. Using the mirror, she angled the camera away, giving them a clear path. "Come on," she urged Emily, guiding her through the maze of corridors. They reached the main floor, where Mary knew the keypad lock was located. She studied it for a moment, remembering the sequence she had seen John use the night before. With trembling fingers, she punched in the numbers. "Please work," she muttered under her breath. The lock clicked open, and Mary pushed the door. They were now in a stairwell leading down to the basement. "Stay close," she whispered to Emily. They descended the stairs, each step echoing ominously in the narrow space. Reaching the bottom, they were greeted by a dimly lit hallway. Mary could hear faint whimpers and the rustling of chains. She followed the sounds until they reached another door. This one was locked as well, but Mary noticed a set of keys hanging on the wall nearby. She grabbed the keys and quickly found the one that fit the lock. The door creaked open, revealing a room filled with terrified children, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. "We're getting you out of here," Mary said softly, her heart breaking at the sight. She moved quickly, unchaining the children and helping them to their feet. "Follow me," she instructed. "We have to move fast." They retraced their steps, Mary leading the group of children through the mansion with a newfound determination. As they reached the main floor, the adrenaline surged through her veins. They were so close to freedom. Just as they neared the service door, Mary heard voices approaching. She motioned for the children to hide behind a large cabinet. Peeking out, she saw John and Sarah. "We need to check on the kids," John was saying. "Something doesn't feel right." Mary's heart pounded. She had to distract them. Picking up a vase from a nearby table, she hurled it down the hall, causing it to shatter loudly. John and Sarah turned towards the noise and rushed off to investigate. Now Mary whispered urgently to the children. They slipped out the door and into the cool night air. Mary led them to a nearby park, where they could rest and regroup. She pulled out her phone and dialed the police, giving them all the details she had gathered. Help was on the way. As they waited, Mary looked at the children, their faces filled with a mix of fear and hope. She had done it. She had saved them. And as the police sirens grew louder, Mary knew that justice would finally be served. She had found her purpose and, in doing so, had brought light to the darkest corners of the mansion. Mary felt a surge of relief as the lock clicked open. They stepped into a small room filled with monitors displaying various parts of the mansion. Without hesitation, Mary disabled the security feed, plunging the mansion into technological blindness. "Let's go," she said, taking Emily's hand and leading her towards the basement where the other children were supposedly held. They found a narrow stairway leading down into darkness. Mary's flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing rows of cells. Inside, she saw several children, their eyes wide with fear and hope. "We're here to help," Mary called softly. "We're getting you out." The children huddled together, and Mary quickly worked to open the cell doors. Her heart ached at the sight of their frightened faces. "Follow me," she instructed, leading the group back up the stairs and towards the side entrance. As they neared the exit, Mary heard footsteps. She froze, signaling the children to stay quiet. John and Sarah's voices echoed down the hall, drawing closer. "Stick together," Mary whispered urgently. "We're almost out." With a final burst of determination, Mary led the children through the door and into the night. They ran across the lawn, the mansion's imposing facade shrinking behind them. "We did it," Emily breathed, tears of relief streaming down her face. Mary hugged her tightly, her own eyes welling with tears. "Yes, we did. You're safe now," but Mary knew their journey wasn't over. They needed to get to the authorities and ensure John and Sarah could never harm another child again. With the children by her side, Mary set off into the night, her heart filled with hope and determination. The cold night air wrapped around Mary and Emily as they slipped out of the mansion and into the surrounding streets. The adrenaline pumping through Mary's veins heightened her senses, making every sound seem louder, every shadow more threatening. Her grip on Emily's hand was firm, a lifeline for the frightened girl. "We have to keep moving," Mary whispered, glancing back at the mansion. "Stay close to me," Emily nodded, her eyes wide with fear but filled with trust. Mary's heart ached for her, but there was no time to dwell on it. They needed to find a safe place, away from the mansion and its dark secrets. As they hurried down the street, Mary's mind raced. She knew they couldn't go to the police station immediately. John and Sarah likely had connections that could complicate things. They needed to hide, at least for a little while, to figure out their next move. "Over here," Mary said, guiding Emily into a narrow alley. They crouched behind a large dumpster, trying to catch their breath. "Are we safe now?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. "Not yet, but we will be," Mary replied, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "I promise I'll protect you." Mary peered out from their hiding spot, scanning the street for any sign of pursuit. The city seemed calm, unaware of the danger lurking in one of its grandest mansions. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "We need to keep moving," Mary said. "There's a place we can go, where they won't find us." Emily nodded, her small hand clutching Mary's tightly. They moved quickly and quietly through the back streets, avoiding the main roads. Mary's mind flashed back to her own children and how she used to protect them. She channeled that same fierce determination now, knowing Emily's safety depended on her. After what felt like hours, they reached an old, abandoned warehouse. Mary knew it wasn't a perfect hiding spot, but it would do for now. She led Emily inside, guiding her to a corner where they could rest. "Stay here," Mary said, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face. "I need to find help." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Please don't leave me." Mary's heart broke at the plea, but she knew she had to go. "I'll be back, I promise. I need to get the police so they can help us." Emily nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Mary hugged her tightly, then stood up, determination etched on her face. "Stay hidden." "I'll be back soon," Mary said, giving Emily one last reassuring look before slipping out of the warehouse. Mary moved quickly through the streets, her senses on high alert. She kept to the shadows, constantly looking over her shoulder. Every noise made her jump, but she pressed on, driven by the need to protect Emily and the other children still trapped in the mansion. When she finally reached the police station, she took a deep breath and walked inside. The harsh fluorescent lights and sterile smell of the station were a stark contrast to the cold night air. Her heart pounded with urgency and desperation. The officer behind the desk, a tall man with a stern expression, looked up from his paperwork. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Please, you have to listen to me," Mary began, her voice trembling. "There are children in danger. They're being held captive in a mansion." The officer, whose name tag read Officer James, raised an eyebrow. "Calm down, ma'am. What exactly are you talking about?" Mary took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I found a group of children locked up in a basement. They're being held against their will by a couple, John and Sarah, in a mansion on the east side of town," she explained, her voice steadying as she spoke. "I managed to get some of them out, but there are more still there." Officer James studied her for a moment, assessing the urgency in her eyes. "All right," he said, reaching for his radio. "Stay here and give me the address. We'll send a team right away." Mary provided the information, her heart racing. "Thank you," she said, relief flooding her as she realized help was finally on the way. The next few hours were a blur. Police swarmed the mansion, rescuing the remaining children and arresting John and Sarah. Mary watched from a distance, a sense of accomplishment and relief washing over her. She had done it. She had saved them. As dawn broke, Mary returned to the warehouse. Emily ran to her, wrapping her arms around her in a tight hug. "You came back," Emily whispered. "I told you I would," Mary replied, her voice choked with emotion. "You're safe now. All of you are." Mary knew the road ahead would be tough for the children, but she also knew they had a fighting chance now. And as she looked at Emily, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had found her strength, her resolve, and her compassion. And she knew that, no matter what, she would continue to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. "I found a young girl, Emily. She's safe for now, but there are more children trapped in that mansion. You have to help them," Mary insisted, her voice trembling with urgency. Officer James leaned back in his chair, skepticism etched into his features. "And how do you know about this?" "I saw them with my own eyes," Mary insisted, her desperation palpable. "They're in the basement, locked up." "Please, you have to believe me," James sighed, glancing at the clock on the wall. Do you have any proof? Because we can't just go raiding a mansion based on a homeless woman's word." Mary's frustration boiled over. "Proof? I saw them. Isn't that enough? Those children are suffering, and you're just going to sit here and do nothing." James stood up, his expression hardening. "Look, lady, we get a lot of stories. We can't act on every single one without evidence. Now, if you can bring us something concrete, we'll look into it. Until then, there's nothing we can do." Mary's shoulders slumped, despair washing over her. "Please just send someone to check. You'll see I'm telling the truth." James shook his head. "I'm sorry, Mom. That's not how it works." Mary clenched her fists, tears of frustration filling her eyes. She felt isolated, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her. "Those children don't have time for your procedures. They need help now." James softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "I understand you're upset, but my hands are tied. If you come back with proof, we can do something." Mary turned away, her mind racing. She couldn't let this end here. The children's lives were at stake, and she couldn't just walk away. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she had to do next. As she stepped out of the station, the cool night air hit her, and she felt a renewed sense of determination. She had to take matters into her own hands. She needed to gather evidence, something undeniable that would force the police to act. She made her way back to the warehouse where she had left Emily. The city was quiet, the streets almost deserted. Mary's mind churned with plans and possibilities. She knew she had to be smart about this. One wrong move could put everyone in even greater danger. Emily's voice broke through her thoughts as she entered the warehouse. The girl ran to her, hugging her tightly. "Are we safe now?" Emily asked, her voice small and frightened. "Not yet, sweetheart," Mary replied, holding her close. "I need to go back and get some proof. Something that will make the police listen." Emily looked up at her, eyes wide with fear. "But it's dangerous." "I know," Mary said softly. "But I promised I'd protect you, and that's what I'm going to do." She spent a few moments comforting Emily, then set about preparing herself for another infiltration. She found a small camera in a nearby store's dumpster, likely discarded but still functional. It would have to do. As she walked back towards the mansion, Mary felt a mixture of fear and determination. She knew the risks, but she couldn't turn back now. The children needed her, and she wouldn't let them down. With one last look at the darkened city around her, Mary steeled herself for the task ahead. She would find the proof she needed, and she would make the police listen. Failure was not an option. The mansion loomed ominously in the darkness as Mary approached, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She had to save those children. With the stolen camera tucked securely in her bag, she slipped through the service door once again, her footsteps silent against the cold marble floors. Every shadow seemed to move, every creak of the house sounded like a warning. Mary steeled herself, her resolve unwavering. She navigated the familiar corridors, avoiding the security cameras she had tampered with earlier. Her goal was clear: find the hidden basement and gather the evidence needed to save the children. She reached the dimly lit corridor leading to the room where she had first found Emily. As she moved silently, the weight of responsibility pressed on her. She couldn't fail now. Mary's hand trembled as she reached for the door, pushing it open slightly. The room was empty, but she knew there had to be more children somewhere. She glanced around, searching for any clues. Her eyes fell on a bookshelf that seemed out of place. She approached it cautiously, running her fingers along the edges. "A hidden door," she whispered to herself, her pulse quickening. She felt around the shelf until she found a small latch. With a soft click, the bookshelf swung open, revealing a dark stairway leading down. Taking a deep breath, Mary descended the stairs, her flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. The air grew colder and damper as she went deeper, the walls closing in around her. She reached the bottom and found herself in a narrow passageway lined with heavy metal doors. Her heart ached at the thought of the children trapped behind those doors. She had to move quickly. Mary pulled out the camera and began recording, documenting every detail. "Hold on, kids. I'm here," she whispered, her voice steady despite her fear. She opened the first door and found a small, dimly lit cell. Inside were two young children, their eyes wide with fear and hope. Mary's heart broke at the sight. "Are you here to help us?" one of them asked, their voice barely a whisper. "Yes, I'm here to get you out," Mary replied, her voice firm with determination. "But I need to gather evidence first. Stay quiet, and I'll be back for you." Mary's heart pounded as she sprinted through the dark streets, clutching the small camera she had found. She had documented everything: the hidden stairway, the basement cells, and the frightened children. The proof was irrefutable. With the camera tucked securely in her bag, she headed straight back to the police station. Every second felt like an eternity. When she burst through the station doors, Officer James looked up, surprise and skepticism on his face. "I have it," Mary said breathlessly. "I have the proof. You have to help those children now." James took the camera and reviewed the footage, his expression shifting from doubt to shock. He nodded sharply and reached for his radio. "We're moving in. Now." Mary felt a wave of relief and exhaustion wash over her. She had done it. The police would rescue the children, and John and Sarah would face justice. She had kept her promise to Emily and all the other children. As the police prepared to storm the mansion, Mary returned to the warehouse. Emily ran to her and Mary hugged her tightly. "You did it," Emily whispered, tears of relief in her eyes. "No, we did it," Mary replied, her voice filled with emotion. "We saved them, and now we can finally be safe." The sun began to rise, casting a warm glow over the city. It marked the end of a long night and the beginning of a new day, filled with hope and possibilities. Mary knew there would be challenges ahead, but she also knew she had the strength to face them. Together, they would rebuild their lives, free from the shadows of the past. Mary had managed to sneak back into the mansion and capture footage of the hidden basement and the children held captive there. But as she fled, the camera slipped from her grasp and hit the ground hard. She prayed it was still functional as she made her way back to the police station. Bursting into the station, she hurried to the front desk where Officer James stood. His expression was wary as she approached. "I have proof," Mary panted, holding up the camera. "I got footage of the children. You have to see this." Officer James took the camera and examined it. "Let's take a look," he said, his skepticism evident. Mary watched anxiously as he connected the camera to a computer. Her heart sank as the screen flickered and then went blank. The camera had been damaged in the fall. James shook his head, a look of exasperation on his face. "There's nothing here, Ma'am. The camera is broken." "No," Mary cried, her voice breaking. "I saw them. You have to believe me." James sighed, his tone dismissive. "Without evidence, we can't do anything. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is." Mary felt a wave of despair wash over her. She had come so close, only to be thwarted by a cruel twist of fate. But as she looked into Emily's terrified eyes, she knew she couldn't give up. Mary's heart raced as she crept back into the mansion. She knew the way to the secret basement now, but the memory of the children's frightened faces haunted her. Each step she took was driven by the need to save them. She descended the hidden stairway, the damp, cold air wrapping around her like a shroud. Her flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. She reached the bottom and found herself in the narrow passageway lined with heavy metal doors. Her resolve hardened as she approached the first door. She knew what lay behind it, but nothing could prepare her for the sight that greeted her. The children inside were huddled together, their eyes wide with fear and despair. Their clothes were torn, and their faces were smudged with dirt. Mary's voice caught in her throat. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm here to get you out." The children stared at her, their eyes filled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. She moved quickly, unlocking the cell and motioning for them to follow her. "Stay close and stay quiet," she instructed. "We have to be careful one by one." She opened the other cells, freeing more children. Each cell revealed another heart-wrenching scene of neglect and fear. Mary felt her anger and compassion growing with every child she freed. In the last cell, she found a group of older children, their faces etched with a mix of defiance and desperation. One of them, a boy around 14, stepped forward. "What's the plan?" he asked, his voice steady despite the circumstances. Mary admired his bravery. "We need to get out without being caught," she explained. "Follow me and do exactly as I say," the boy nodded, turning to the others. "You heard her. Let's go." Mary led the group back through the narrow passageway, her mind racing with plans. She knew the mansion's layout now, and she had to use that knowledge to their advantage. The children moved silently behind her, their fear palpable. They reached the top of the stairs, and Mary peeked out, ensuring the coast was clear. She motioned for the children to follow her, leading them through the dimly lit corridors. As they approached the main hall, Mary heard voices approaching. She signaled the children to hide behind a large curtain. Holding her breath, she listened as John and Sarah's footsteps grew louder. "We need to check the basement again," John said. "Something doesn't feel right." Mary's heart pounded in her chest. She needed to act fast. She waited until their footsteps faded before motioning for the children to move again. They slipped through the mansion, avoiding detection with each turn. Finally, they reached the side entrance. "Almost there," Mary whispered, pushing the door open. The cool night air hit their faces, a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere inside the mansion. They hurried across the lawn, the children clinging to Mary and each other. "We did it," the boy whispered, his voice filled with awe and relief. Mary nodded, her own eyes filling with tears. "Yes, we did, but we're not safe yet. We need to get to the police and make sure John and Sarah can never hurt anyone again." With the children by her side, Mary set off into the night, her heart filled with hope and determination. She guided them through the back streets, avoiding the main roads. After what felt like hours, they reached a small, nondescript building. It was an old community center Mary had once volunteered at, now abandoned but still providing some semblance of shelter. "Stay here," Mary instructed the children as they settled inside. "I need to get the police so they can help us," the children nodded, their eyes trusting and hopeful. Mary left the community center and made her way back to the police station. The streets were eerily quiet, the city asleep, unaware of the horrors hidden in its midst. She burst into the station, desperation driving her forward. "Please," she cried, running up to Officer James. "The children are safe, but you have to help us. They're at the old community center. I couldn't get the proof, but you can see for yourself. Please, just come with me." James looked at her, his skepticism melting away as he saw the determination and desperation in her eyes. He nodded, reaching for his radio. "All right, let's go." The next few hours were a blur. The police arrived at the community center, taking the children into their care and launching a raid on the mansion. John and Sarah were arrested, their crimes exposed for the world to see. As dawn broke, Mary stood outside the police station, her heart filled with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Emily ran to her, wrapping her arms around her tightly. "You did it," Emily whispered, tears of gratitude in her eyes. "No, we did it," Mary replied, her voice filled with emotion. "We saved them." The sun began to rise, casting a warm glow over the city. It marked the end of a long night and the beginning of a new day, filled with hope and possibilities. Mary knew there would be challenges ahead, but she also knew she had the strength to face them. Together they would rebuild their lives, free from the shadows of the past. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant sound, set Mary's nerves on edge. As they approached the main floor, she heard voices. Quickly, she signaled for the children to hide behind a large curtain. John and Sarah's voices echoed through the hall, discussing their plans. "We need to move them soon," Sarah said coldly. "We can't risk another incident." Mary's heart pounded in her chest. She waited until the voices faded, then continued leading the children towards the service door. They were so close to freedom. The first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon as Mary and the children moved silently through the mansion. The night's chill clung to the air, heightening the tension that filled every corner of the grand house. Mary led the way, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. They had to make it out before John, Sarah, and their guards discovered them. "Stay close and be as quiet as you can," Mary whispered to the children. They nodded, their eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. As they neared the main entrance, the sound of footsteps echoed through the corridor. Mary's heart raced. She quickly ushered the children into a small storage room, pressing a finger to her lips to signal silence. "Wait here," she mouthed, and the children huddled together, their faces pale. Mary stepped back into the hallway, just as John and Sarah, flanked by 2 guards, appeared around the corner. John's face twisted with anger, while Sarah's eyes were cold and calculating. "What's going on here?" John demanded, his voice a low growl. Mary took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I found the children. They're safe now and you won't hurt them anymore." Sarah laughed, a harsh, cruel sound. "And how do you plan to stop us?" "You're just one woman." Mary's eyes flashed with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes." The guards moved forward, but Mary raised her hands. "Wait. If you come after me, you'll never find the children." John's eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" "I want you to let them go," Mary said. "Let them go, and I'll go with you. No trouble." Sarah's eyes flicked to John, then back to Mary. "And why should we trust you?" "You don't have a choice," Mary replied, taking a step back, leading them away from the storage room. "Come on, follow me." Mary turned and ran, her heart pounding. The guards chased after her, but she knew the mansion better now. She darted through corridors and down hidden passages, drawing them further away from the children's hiding spot. "Get her," John shouted, his voice echoing through the halls. Mary glanced back, making sure the guards were still on her trail. She led them towards the east wing, where the layout was more complex. Her mind raced with memories of her past life, her children, and the promise she made to herself to protect the innocent. As she rounded a corner, she stumbled, catching herself against the wall. The guards closed in, and Mary felt a surge of protectiveness and courage. She couldn't let them catch her. She had to give the children enough time to escape. "Keep going," she whispered to herself, pushing off the wall and continuing her frantic run. She reached a small, narrow passageway and squeezed through, knowing the guards would have a harder time following. The passage led to a secluded part of the mansion, a forgotten storage area filled with old furniture and dusty boxes. Mary crouched behind a large wardrobe, her breathing heavy and labored. The guards' footsteps grew louder as they approached. Mary's mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. She needed to keep them occupied, away from the children. As the guards entered the storage area, she grabbed an old vase and threw it against the wall opposite her hiding spot. The vase shattered, drawing the guards' attention. "There she is," one of them shouted, rushing towards the noise. Mary took advantage of the distraction, slipping out of the storage area and back into the labyrinthine corridors of the mansion. She knew she had to keep moving, to stay one step ahead. As she ran, She could hear John and Sarah's angry voices echoing through the halls, mingling with the shouts of the guards. Her legs burned with exhaustion, but she pushed on, driven by the thought of the children huddled in the storage room, waiting for her. Mary's path led her to the mansion's grand ballroom, a vast, opulent space with high ceilings and crystal chandeliers. She paused for a moment, catching her breath and surveying her surroundings. The ballroom was empty, but she knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. She spotted a large curtain at the far end of the room, similar to the one she had used to hide the children. With no other options, she sprinted towards it, ducking behind the heavy fabric just as the guards burst into the room. "Spread out and find her," John barked, his voice filled with rage. Mary held her breath, listening as the guards fanned out across the ballroom. She pressed herself against the wall, willing herself to remain silent and still. 10 minutes felt like hours as she waited, her heart pounding in her chest. The guards searched the room, overturning furniture and peering behind curtains. Just as one of them neared her hiding spot, a loud crash echoed from the corridor outside the ballroom. Over here, a guard shouted, and they all rushed towards the noise. Mary let out a silent sigh of relief, her body trembling with fear and adrenaline. She waited a few more moments to ensure the coast was clear, then slipped out from behind the curtain. She needed to get back to the children and lead them to safety. As she made her way back through the mansion, she thought about the sacrifices she was willing to make to ensure their freedom. Finally, she reached the storage room where the children were hiding. They looked up at her with wide, anxious eyes. "We have to move quickly," Mary whispered. "Follow me and stay close." The children nodded, their faces pale but determined. Mary led them through the mansion, avoiding the main corridors and sticking to the shadows. As they neared the service door, she could see the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. "Almost there," she whispered, her voice filled with hope. She pushed open the door, and they slipped out into the cool morning air. The mansion loomed behind them, its dark secrets now exposed to the light of day. Mary led the children across the lawn and into the safety of the surrounding woods. They moved quickly, putting as much distance between themselves and the mansion as possible. As they reached a safe clearing, Mary finally allowed herself to relax. "We did it," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. The children gathered around her, their faces filled with gratitude and relief. "Thank you," Emily whispered, hugging Mary tightly. "You saved us." "No, we saved each other," Mary replied, her heart swelling with pride and love. She knew their journey wasn't over, but they had taken the first crucial step towards freedom. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Mary looked around at the children she had rescued. They had found their strength, their courage, and their hope, and they had done it together. As she emerged into a large storage room, Mary heard the guards struggling behind her. "Come on, Mary, you can do this," she muttered, looking around for anything she could use to block their path. She spotted a stack of heavy crates and, with all her strength, pushed them over, creating a barricade. The guards shouted in frustration, but Mary didn't stop to listen. She ran towards the back door, which led to the garden. Bursting through the door, Mary took a moment to catch her breath. She was outside, but she knew she couldn't rest yet. She had to make sure the children were safe. Back at the storage room, the children huddled together, their ears straining to hear any sound. Emily, her face pale but determined, looked at the older boy. "We need to go now," she whispered. "Mary's giving us a chance." The boy nodded, leading the children out of the room and towards the secret exit Mary had shown them. They moved quickly and quietly, their hearts pounding with fear and hope. As they reached the exit, they saw the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. Freedom was just a few steps away. They ran, their feet pounding the ground, driven by the promise of safety. Mary watched from the garden as the children made their way to freedom. Relief flooded her, but she knew her job wasn't done. She turned back towards the mansion, ready to face whatever came next. The guards burst through the door, their faces twisted with rage. Mary stood tall, her heart filled with fierce determination. She had done what she needed to do. Now she had to protect the children, no matter the cost. The sun had risen fully by the time the children reached the police station, their faces pale and eyes wide with fear and hope. The older boy, leading the group, pushed open the door and hurried to the front desk. "Please, we need help," he said urgently. "There are more children trapped in a mansion. You have to save them." The officer on duty, startled by the sudden appearance of so many children, quickly called for backup. "Stay here, kids. We're going to take care of this," he reassured them. Meanwhile, Mary had been captured by John and his guards. They dragged her back into the mansion, their faces twisted with anger. John shoved her into a chair, glaring at her. "You're going to regret this," he hissed. "What did you think you were doing?" Mary met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. "Saving those children from monsters like you." John raised his hand to strike her, but before he could, the sound of sirens filled the air. He froze, his face draining of color. The police, Sarah screamed, panic in her voice. Mary felt a surge of relief and triumph. The children had made it. The police were coming. John and Sarah's reign of terror was about to end. The front doors burst open, and officers poured into the mansion, their weapons drawn. "Everyone on the ground," one of them shouted. John and Sarah tried to run, but it was too late. The police quickly subdued them, placing them in handcuffs. Officer James, the skeptical officer Mary had spoken to before, approached her, his expression one of astonishment and respect. "You did it," he said quietly, helping her to her feet. "You saved them." Mary nodded, her body trembling with exhaustion. "I couldn't have done it without the children." Officer James looked at her, his respect evident. "You showed incredible courage. We're going to make sure John and Sarah pay for what they've done." As the police began to escort John and Sarah out, Mary turned to see the children being reunited with their families who had rushed to the station upon hearing the news. Tears of joy and relief streamed down their faces as they embraced their loved ones. Emily ran up to Mary, hugging her tightly. "Thank you, Mary. You saved us." Mary hugged her back, her heart swelling with pride and love. "No, we saved each other," she replied, her voice filled with emotion. "And now we can finally be safe." As the sun rose higher in the sky, Mary looked around at the children she had rescued. They had found their strength, their courage, and their hope, and they had done it together. Outside, the children were being treated by paramedics. Emily saw Mary and ran to her, throwing her arms around her in a tight hug. "You kept your promise," she whispered. Mary hugged her back, tears of relief streaming down her face. "I always will." The media quickly descended on the scene, eager to cover the story of the brave homeless woman who had uncovered a child trafficking ring. Mary found herself thrust into the spotlight, hailed as a hero. "Mary, how did you manage to save all those children?" a reporter asked, shoving a microphone in her face. Mary took a deep breath, looking around at the children she had saved. "It wasn't just me," she said. "These children were incredibly brave. They trusted me, and we worked together. This is their victory as much as it is mine." John and Sarah were led away in handcuffs, their faces twisted with anger and defeat. Justice had finally caught up with them, thanks to Mary's courage and determination. In the days that followed, Mary and the children received medical and psychological help. The trauma they had endured would take time to heal, but they were safe now, and that was what mattered. Mary's bravery was recognized publicly, and she was offered support and resources to help rebuild her life. She reconnected with some of the children she had saved, forming lasting bonds that brought her a sense of fulfillment and joy. One evening, as she sat with Emily in a cozy new apartment provided by a local charity, Mary felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but they had faced the darkness together and emerged into the light. "You're a real hero," Emily said, smiling up at her. Mary smiled back, her heart full. "And you're my hero, Emily. We did this together." As the sun set outside, casting a warm glow over the city, Mary knew that she had found her purpose. She would continue to fight for justice, to protect the vulnerable, and to bring hope to those who needed it most. The nightmare was over, but her journey had just begun. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the judge entered and took his seat. The trial of John and Sarah, the masterminds behind the horrific child abduction and abuse ring, had gripped the entire city. Mary sat in the front row, Emily by her side, holding her hand tightly. The other rescued children were there too, their faces a mix of hope and anxiety. As the proceedings began, Mary's mind flashed back to the terrifying night spent infiltrating the mansion, the desperate flight through dark streets, and the eventual rescue of the children. She had fought so hard for this moment, and now justice was within reach. "All rise," the bailiff called as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. "John and Sarah, you have been found guilty of multiple counts of child abduction, unlawful imprisonment, and abuse," the judge announced, his voice firm and resolute. "Your actions have caused unimaginable pain and suffering. It is the decision of this court that you both be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." A collective sigh of relief swept through the courtroom. Mary felt tears welling up in her eyes. Finally, the nightmare was over. The judge continued, "Furthermore, all assets of the convicted are to be seized and used to compensate the victims and their families. The court has decided that these funds will also support the establishment of a new orphanage, ensuring a safe and nurturing environment for the children affected by these heinous acts." Mary squeezed Emily's hand, her heart swelling with gratitude and hope. They had not only achieved justice but also secured a brighter future for the children. Months later, Mary stood at the entrance of the newly built orphanage. The building was a far cry from the grim mansion where the children had been held. It was a place filled with light, laughter, and love, a true sanctuary. "Welcome to Hope Haven," Mary said, her voice filled with pride as she addressed a group of visitors. "This is where we've built a new beginning, thanks to the compensation from John and Sarah's assets." Emily ran up to her, a beaming smile on her face. "Mary, come see the new garden. The flowers are blooming," Mary laughed, her heart light. "Lead the way, Emily." As they walked through the lush gardens, Mary reflected on how far they had come. The children who had once been so frightened and scarred were now thriving, their faces full of joy and hope. Emily said, looking up at her with wide eyes. "Do you think they'll ever come back?" Mary knelt down and took Emily's hands in hers. "No, sweetheart, they'll never hurt anyone ever again. You're safe now, and you always will be." And as the sun set, casting a warm glow over the city, Mary knew that she had truly found her calling. She would continue to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves, and she would ensure that Hope Haven remained a place of safety, love, and new beginnings. The future was bright, and Mary, with Emily and the other children by her side, was ready to embrace it. Emily hugged her tightly, and Mary felt a profound sense of peace. They had turned a story of horror and pain into one of healing and hope. Together, they had created a family. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over Hope Haven, Mary looked around at the children playing, their laughter echoing through the air. She knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter for all of them. "We did it," she whispered, feeling a tear slip down her cheek. "We really did it with the darkness of the past behind them." Mary and the children looked forward to a future filled with love, safety, and endless possibilities. And that brings us to the end of this story. A homeless woman finds a trash bag full of baby clothes, only to discover something that scares her deeply. What have you learned from this tale? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below with one thing you've learned and plan to bring into practice in your life. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.